Hey, I'm Daniel Berger, and this is Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Welcome to the podcast where Metro New York real estate meets great stories and a douse of humor. Forget the dry sales talk. Here we dive into the fun and unexpected moments of real estate. Join me each week as we explore Westchester, Long Island, the Bronx, and more. You'll hear about the people, the places, and the crazy situations that make this industry so interesting. Thanks to our sponsor, Remax Prestige Properties, we're ready to share the lighter side of real estate. Whether you're a pro, a buyer, or just curious, we've got something for everyone. Ready for today's adventure? Let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker with Daniel Berger. This week, I'm excited to have on Hillary Johns. She's an attorney that practices, I think, mostly in California, Montana, and New York. She's a trial attorney with, I believe she has 150 cases that went to verdict, which is people, they need to be more afraid of her because if she's getting to verdict and she's not settling, she knows she's going to win. So that's all good. But I wanted to think she's a speaker, she's a writer, she's a pro bono advocate for the unserved communities, which is all good to donate. And another thing about her, before we let her talk, is that she was a competitive soccer player. And I certainly want to know all that. Why don't we start about soccer? Because that's quite interesting. Welcome and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here. And I love your title. It's so fun.
So I was going to call the book. So I just wrote a book, actually. I published a book about a month ago called The Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. My podcast and the book were going to be called and Another Thing Fatso. And the reason is that I had a client, she was bipolar, and she would leave me all these messages, like 12 messages in a row on voicemail. And one of the last ones before I blocked her, in a raspy voice, she starts to call. And another thing, facts. And then she basically rants. She's not even ranting about me. She's ranting about the owner of my client, not me. But it was like a thing that I would have to explain that all the time. So I changed it from another thing. So that's the name of a chapter in my book. And that entire voicemail that started and another thing fatso is transcribed in the book. So you can hear exactly or read exactly what she wrote word for word in that document. And as we do have adventures, and you have tons of adventures as a real estate attorney or as a trial attorney, and it was just basically anecdotes, right? So my book is about lighthearted things that have happened. It's not someone's like, you should call it the confessions of. I'm like, confessions of. I'm not like exposing stuff. I'm really saying that it's difficult and how do we do it together and all of that. But yeah, so first I'd like to hear a little bit about you being a competitive soccer player.
I was very fortunate. When I was young. I was scouted by an excellent coach, and he coached me through junior high school, went into college. I went to a big school and then transferred. And I was very lucky to be put in front of the right people and have some talent and trained very hard. And I got recruited in my sophomore year for pro teams. And so the scouts came out to some of my games. And after graduation, they invited me. And I made tryouts for teams in LA and the Bay Area, made both. And did both while I was in law school. So I didn't have a lot of free time, but it was awesome. I'm a huge proponent of women's sports. And men's sports. I think that athletics are great if the right messages are taught and the right values, not only fitness, but teamwork and perseverance and playing fair and treating others with respect. I won't say it wasn't tough at times, but I really enjoyed it. And I often meet a lot of other former athletes. I'm fortunate I made a professional level, but there are a lot of outstanding athletes throughout our country. And I think it's great that there's been so many programs for young adults and for adults too, because I don't think athletics stops when you get into high school or even in college. I think that fitness is a lifelong journey, and everybody has their own journey. And I think there are a lot of good things that come from it. So the lessons I learned from my coach, in particular, who's unfortunately now passed away, I carry with me for a lifetime. And I really understand the value of good mentorship and good leadership, and people who care, not only invest in you, but don't exploit you for your talent and really care about you. So there are so many things that I remember every day about what I learned that I use in my practice and fitness and in life that I think I'm extremely grateful.
So I like what you were talking about liking sports, and then you slipped and said female sports. And but I don't think it's a slip. And I think you're right though, because clearly, in professional sports, generally it goes by eyeballs and money and things like that. And so an example would be even tennis, right? So maybe there's more money in male tennis, but I like that, like US Open. And I think Billie Jean King was a huge proponent of saying the prize award should be the same. And I think, and I'm okay with that because ultimately it's people that are coming to watch tennis, right? You don't pay for this event or that event, you play to watch the tennis. But also what you said, I think it's more about nurturing, right? Where sometimes we do have to pay special attention to maybe in the, like you said, in female sports because not enough attention played, and yet so much can be learned and so much growth can happen. So I think it's fine to say that certain sports we should, how do we help people even more than others? Because clearly, like an example would be with men's like college football, there's nothing that needs to be done because it's all this money involved. And if anything, it's a business. But how do you can try to get other sports, whether it's men's, women's, whether it's crew, whether it's soccer, whether it's tennis or golf, right? To try to help motivate people because of the lessons I think that you learn in a competitive sport.
No, I agree with that. And look, the reality is the ratings are going to get the sponsors and the popularity is going to get the merchandising and the ads and things like that. And it feeds into it. But sports is a business, and sports has become a business at all levels, starting at young children who are getting coaches and teams and paid for this and who's paying for that. And then that's morphed into high school, which we've always known, and college athletes and amateur athletes that are now getting paid for their likeness and image. And that's a whole new landscape with all the changes. And what happens after your career too? I know there's a movement towards that, helping athletes who have devoted so much time and attention to this, to what are you going to do afterwards? Are you going to coach? Are you going to mentor? Are you going to move into another career and teaching things like financial literacy and pay? But equal pay has always been something, but what it comes to is the ratings and popularity. The reality is not as many people right now, unfortunately, are going to watch women's volleyball as they are a game on Sunday, NFL game on Sunday. That's just how.
Although with the Olympics coming to Los Angeles, so I think more people will watch regular volleyball and beach volleyball. I think those are beach volleyball. I think is started up, but I like with you being a competitive athlete, it seems as though that training and hard work, right? You train and do all the hard work for far greater than the time that you're actually on the field, which seems to me has prepared you for being a trial attorney, where you don't just wake up and say we're going to court today and you have exhaustive practice, pulling up deposition work. And so isn't the whole point like you're never supposed to ask a question in court for an answer that you don't know the answer to?
It's a cross-examination question. It's a rule I don't always follow, but usually the rule is never ask a question in cross that you don't know the answer to, or of your client for that matter, even if it's indirect. And no, I completely agree. And I talked to several of the athletes who really think that in my case, it's trial work, but others like real estate brokers and things like that. Having that athletic, not just the drive, but the work and the discipline and the every day getting up and doing and training hard and working really hard, and maybe there's not something that comes from your work every day. It's the day in, day out of doing it and doing those things that pushes trials forward. So I'm quite certain that pushed me towards trial work too. I grew up watching Perry Mason reruns, so I always enjoyed
Yes.
that. So I wanted to be a trial lawyer. But again, the lessons I learned from me in sports training, and I have talked to other athletes who feel the same way. They're like, yeah, those lessons, the persistence, the consistency, the everyday, the pushing is a big part of it. And it doesn't just apply to on the field or in training too.
They talk so again, I wish I was good enough that I could be competitive in a sport. I'm not, but I'm realistic. So that's okay, which is why I love golf so much because you talked about the camaraderie, the sportsmanship, right? So golf is really all about sportsmanship, and you self-enforce the rules on yourself if you're playing competitive golf. And obviously leisure golf is a little different, but you're out, you're playing. But what I realized from I'm actually a member of the Golf Writers of America, so I've turned a hobby of helping doing sports casting into that. But a lot of it is like muscle memory, and it's whether it's you being an athlete, a soccer player, or a trial. The more practice and repetitions that you have doing something, when you're in game time and something comes up, you're more able to to perform properly, right? Whether it's shooting a goal in a penalty shot or from the corner kick or what have you, because you've done it so much and you feel comfortable. It's got to be the same thing when you're in front of a judge and the judge is asking you specific questions and you're not nervous because you've been there before, you've done it, you have the experience.
Yeah, I no, I agree. I wouldn't say I'm never nervous, and I always think that's because you actually care. Some of the best lawyers I know are like, not they're not having breakdowns, but they're a little shaky before they go. They're like, okay, we're moving really fast and things like that. I think that's a sign that you care. You're getting amped up, of course, like you would a drink. But no, I agree like that. There's something about being there before. I've done it several times. It doesn't mean you take it for granted. I want to be clear because anybody can win on any given day. I've been in court thinking we're likely to win this and we've lost. I've gone into court and going, oh God, there's no way we're going to win this and we've won. You don't always know what's going to go. It's like being on the field. You don't always know what's going to go on. Judges make bad rulings, refs make bad calls. A witness doesn't perform as expected. A key piece of evidence gets let into evidence or it gets kept out of evidence. So I do agree there's a lot of similarities and crossover and with things like that too.
I guess the good news is in some sports there are reviews, not all sports, and also depends on what the review would be. Court, at least you have an appeal, right? Up until you're at the Supreme Court, you can still appeal it to a higher court if you feel that something wasn't based off of the law. But it's certainly a pain and it's very expensive. But I think that's the idea that the more you practice, then you'll be more calm and being able to react. And I think it's the same thing in real estate, right? Where as a broker, I have agents that are part time. They don't do so much business. So when things come up, they're really not exactly sure how to react because it's new to them. And so for me, doing 65 deals myself a year, plus my team and coaching and mentoring, I'm able to either I've seen it before or it's okay. So how are you going to think about it? So something comes up and how are we going to put our hat on and think outside the box? I'm a broker because I like thinking outside the box and I like to be creative and do things better, different, and special than the way that it's always been. So I'm like 8 years into real estate and just I'm just me and I'm just trying to how do I help my clients? And so sometimes it was I feel for me it's been better being older. I'm 56 and being older but feeling new, right? So for me, this is I'm using my life resources as a sales and marketing person, as a homeowner, as a tenant, and all these other things are my life experiences. So I'm able to help my clients if they want to be an investor. I own some property, so I'm able to do that and think about it. I think all of those things lead up to right to experience and being able to perform better. I'm assuming that with 150 verdicts on under your belt, how many trials did you have to start to get to 150 verdicts?
I've been in practice 32 years. So bear in mind, averaging that out, that's little less than three a year. So when you think a lot of my trials were at the beginning of my career, I remember I had a 3 or 4 month stretch where I was in trial every week. Because in those days in the 90s, you could get a fast trial. You could get a fast jury trial or bench trial. You could impanel a jury pretty quickly. It was really amazing. There are differences in the court system now. Then the trend went towards private judging and arbitration. I've had 4 trials this year. So that just happened to be this year. I know excellent trial lawyers who don't have a trial for a couple of years. And that does
Right.
happen too, where we've had these periods of time. But I worked for well-known regional firms when I first started, and they were very active trial lawyers. And that was one of my criteria, and probably theirs too, that are you an active trial practice? Will I get to try cases? Will I get to handle these independently? Will you teach me? And that was one of their criteria in hiring. We don't want someone who's sitting in the back office writing briefs and never gets outside. We want someone who's going to go out there, represent our firm. You're going to win for us and you're going to do this. So it was they were very mutually beneficial relationships, and they're still literally friends and mentors to me today, where we had similar values and goals. There's not a lot of attorneys who try cases in addition to. So you tend to get a reputation, or people know that trial lawyers are. And then someone says, I've been in trial in 15 years, that might not be the choice for you. They've had 3 trials or they've had trials before and they're marketing themselves as a trial lawyer, but they've tried 5 cases in a 30-year career. That might not be the lawyer you want. Maybe, I'm not saying it isn't, There are also, yeah, there are different kinds of trial lawyers, but by and large, I believe less than 5% of lawyers are trial lawyers, and even less are women. Most cases don't go to trial, so a lot of people bank on that. So maybe they've gone to a couple of trials, but they're really not. A lot of things happen in a trial that do not happen in litigation or transactions. And there's what I call the freak out factor. People get stressed out and freak out. There's putting up evidence, there's presenting well. And it's like a game time. Someone can do very well in practice for years and look good and all these things. But when it comes to game, they just completely choke. You see this all the time. You see it in business, you see it in politics, you see it in sports, you see it in trial. And it's the same kind of idea for that. So that's how I got started.
So speaking of choking, I feel that the National Association of Realtors choked in their trial, right? The commission lawsuit and even the settlement. What are your opinions on that?
I think there was a lot going on behind the scenes that I don't know. I think there were other factors influencing that decision. I think in both of the situations, both sides had a lot to lose. And they did. And I think the risk of losing, and there's also the PR aspect, which I think a lot of people ignore in litigation.
Except that I would say that NAR lost in all fronts. There was no front that the only thing that NAR did not lose with is that the lawsuit stopped. So my view is that they protected their own, they protected more lawsuits by selling the realtors, which were actually right there. The realtors are actually what makes up the guild. And they basically sold everyone down a river for ridiculousness. So obviously, to summarize, the trial happened in Kansas City. I think it was Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah.
And if you looked at my book of business and what I charged listings and what I receive on the buy side, you would see that the numbers are they're different. They're not all the same. And it seems like they cherry picked a part of the country where the commission might be almost identical up and down the road. But that's not, that's one area. That is, so they should have lost it in Kansas City, Missouri, potentially. Maybe there was some form of collusion or price fixing, because if everything happens to be the same number, that is fishy. But if you looked at like my book of business, you'd be like, oh, it's all different, and it's markedly different, right? It's not all like in a small point. So if you looked at my book of business, you would say, clearly it's a negotiation, right? Because it's not the same number.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree.
So,
but I've seen the flip side of that, and without, I can't reach any confidences, but again, I think there was a lot to lose there. I think there were other policy decisions, and again, I was not involved in the case, but certainly agree with the forum shopping. I agree with that. I've seen it often, and you can get a different state here in California. You can get a different county, you get a different result. I mean,
and I also feel that, again, the reason why I felt we were sold down the river is they just wanted to stop the lawsuit. So they do this agreement, which actually has turned commission into being transparent to translucent, because now nobody knows what it is. And actually, I saw that the study that a year after, they saw that the commissions have gone up. So it actually did the opposite effect for the buyers, where their commission, their gross total commission has gone up, because now it's secretive. So before it was more, it was on the MLS. You can see what the commission was. Everybody knew. Now it's not that case. So again, but that's, to me, that's not law helping people. That's right, because that was basically a class action lawsuit and all that.
And I think anytime there's a change in the law, there's people who are going to make good with it, and there's people who are going to exploit it. And they're
except that the law didn't change. The law, there is no law that, it's basically the rule that if you want to be a realtor, right, realtor and a part of the National Association of Realtors, you must adhere to their rules, but it's not a law, right? Because you don't have to be a member. There, no laws were changed. It was basically the settlement that said our members will now practice this differently.
Right. It's law, and I misspoke. It's the law. It's law to the extent of breach of contract. So if you're in an agreement or a member of a group and you don't abide by them, there's going to be that. So again, I consider that, because what's going to happen if it's not, and it does wind up in court, this is the document that goes. So in that case, I do consider it law. It's not law, for example, it's illegal to kill a person or negligence requires duty, care, causation, damage in that respect. But it is an agreement that's going to be interpreted a certain way. So in that way, I do consider not a law, but a rule that there's a binding agreement that's going to affect everybody else. And by being a member or staying a member, you're held to that standard.
Yes.
Again, I have not seen too much come from it that's changed much that's good. I agree. But again, I wasn't involved in the
Of
lawsuit.
course, I know, we're just talking law, not specifics
Well,
to
there's a
what
lot of
Hillary did.
there's a lot of my colleagues have written articles about this was a talked about case, and it's because it affects a lot of people. It affects a lot of people in the industry, and you are seeing it moving, particularly in our respective in California and New York, to reform these systems and what brokers and what realtors can do and those kinds of things, and to protect the consumer, but are they really, or protect the property owner, but who are they really helping? Real estate regulations tend to be, as a whole, very ineffective in certain times. And I can tell you as a California, New York litigator, that's true. And it particularly, there are always issues when people are involved. There's human error, there's personalities, there's interpretation, there's conduct. The reality is we all want our land. We all need land. We don't, as much as we'd like to live in the cloud, we don't. We need our land. No, it is. It's a very fundamental thing. And everybody needs land, whether it's in the air or whether it's here, you need your space. So people are going to continue to fight for that, and they're going to find new ways to do that. The problem is the law does not predict things, it reacts to situations. And so I get this a lot with clients going, the law should be different here. I'm like, you're looking at the current state of the law reacting to a particular set of circumstances at a given point in time. And that's going to be continuing updates. So the problem with the law often, and I hear this from clients in a lot of areas that we litigate, is that's not really my situation. That's not really what happened here. Why isn't the law telling them they can or can't do something? Like, because they're behind. The law is always catching up. In certain areas, the law has made a lot of progress. But for example, intellectual property has had a lot of litigation lately. AI is in its infancy. We don't know how that's going to work out. Contract laws, we have cases where we're still in real estate. We're looking back to the 1800s for insights about, because it's not just the law itself, like who wants to litigate it, who wants to take it up to appeal. So what you're describing is also a common problem, because you have a settlement, which is an agreement that you're going to have to adhere to, but does that really help? Does that need to be modified? Is there going to be further litigation about it later, which I think is extremely likely? And again, so this was not a well-received agreement. I do think there were policy and other decisions around it, but again, I think also was to prevent these continuing problems with that lawsuit, which is the primary motivator. And sometimes they make decisions whether they were ill-advised, well-advised or not. I mean, this is going to stop this. And again, I've given that advice. I don't know what advice was given here, but you do this is going to end it today. There's going to be some things you don't like. There's going to be things some your, for lack of a better word, constituents or members are not going to like, but it's going to stop it. And I do think, and again, I wasn't there. I didn't talk to these people. That was one of the primary motivators, because that is a landslide. It is.
Yes, or a mudslide, maybe even. But yeah, so ultimately, in many things in life, it was something else that came about that I had nothing to do with, and I can't prevent it. So all I can do is say, how do I pivot from what the new rule is and adapt it to make sense? So I know that there was some rules that said for the buyer's agreement, what you have to say in this agreement, what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say. You're not allowed to have a sliding scale. So that was all odd. And they said you can do things, you can't do that. And so this is where I was saying my wife's a lawyer and my daughter's a lawyer. And I'm like, can I take an agreement and amend it? And kind of the way that we were told was like, no, you can't. But if you talk to a lawyer, it's like you can amend any contract you want. If both sides agree to it, you can change it.
There are some statutes they don't allow it. There are statutes and laws, and that's changed because, and I will tell you in several areas, solicitation, privacy, waiver of rights, confidentiality, there were a lot of these deals being made, and I'm not saying yours is, but
Right.
people were strong-armed saying, yeah, fine, we'll give you your money, but you're never going to be able to do these things, where that's not
Right.
the law. But
Yeah, but this would be more like, okay, you agreed to X commission before we even met. And is it okay if I lower it to this number.
Right.
So that's the other thing. If you're going to lower the commission, why would two parties not be able to amend an agreement to lower? So in the sense of lowering, I would think that you're the most protected. If you go up, maybe you can say they're strong arming, and that's a whole other thing. But no one's going to, it would be hard to be in trouble for saying, you know what, we said it was going to be X, it's now X minus two because that's what they're accept, and I accept that. But again, thankfully, I was able to work with lawyers, my in-house lawyers, to be able to come up with something that seemed to make sense within the rules. And that brought something up. You work two of the states that you work in for real estate is California and New York. California doesn't not only does not require lawyers, doesn't really have lawyers that are involved in the real estate transactions. Meanwhile, in New York, it's a lawyer state. We must have lawyers, and I love. So I do business in New York and Connecticut. I'm licensed in both. Connecticut's a little different, but from a New York perspective, as opposed to California, I love that it's all based off of lawyers are the ones that draft the contracts, lawyers negotiate the contracts, and lawyers oversee the signing and executing of the contracts and the closings. I love that I'm able to look to the subject matter experts, people that went to law school, people that are practicing law to actually do law things, as opposed to me, I'm the real estate guy. So I like that. And I can't even imagine having to pretend to be the lawyer in California. So, what do you feel about the two different states from a legal perspective using lawyers? And what do you recommend for either agents and or your clients that are in both states?
Well, a couple of things, and those are all good questions. I agree. It's do you bring them, do you bring the lawyers in before or do you bring them in after? And there's so much real estate litigation going on in California's litigation city. You are, Daniel, far more knowledgeable and sophisticated than probably a lot of lawyers and certainly most lay people because of your experience and things like that. But I would say in California, we teach about this, we instruct people about it. It's always a good idea to maybe, if you're making a financial investment like that, make sure it is a good idea to at least talk to a lawyer and find out what the rules are about disclosures. Like a lot of, if you're talking residential, a lot of people don't know to get a contractor in there and have it inspected and make sure that things are okay. And if there's an ADU, for example, was it permitted? If there was a remodel, was it permitted? Because you're going to get stuck with that bill. And you have these CAR forms that people fill out and they don't realize until after how expensive it's going to be to fix this if there's a problem. So I think New York adds an expense, I think, of having a lawyer up front and involving them, but it does include a lot of due diligence because New York's a smaller state, certainly, but you're seeing a lot more litigation in California. And again, California is litigation happy, but you're seeing a lot of litigation and things that maybe if there was a lawyer, they could have been prevented. I mean, I just did a podcast the other day. I was telling my colleague, and one of the things I said, these are what you need to do before you buy a home or sell it. And these are the things you must do. It's a good idea to do these things. I think a lot of people do not think about these things. They are not knowledgeable. They fall in love with a house or the idea of having a house, and I'm talking just residential. Commercial is another matter, but there are some rules that apply. And I'm going to love it here. And oh my God, the tree lined streets, and they're not thinking about anything. There's a water in the corner there. Or when's the last time the electrical was upgraded? This house was built in 1908. And they're thinking, oh, it's so charming. So that charming thing that may need a few touch-ups becomes a money pit and it's not a fixer. And they didn't know to have a contractor come in and say, look, given the age of these and pull permits to see if any modifications were done legally, that this may be that, or maybe there's a crazy neighbor. This is a big deal that we have. Or if you're buying in Manhattan, as there's a lot of associations and boards that you have to deal with. You might want to know who you're dealing with before you buy it. Because these people, your neighbors, are not going to get out of your life if they're in an association book. You're going to have to play by their rules. You're going to have to live with them, and things you want to do may be very different. So in California, you're seeing a proliferation of boards and condo associations and housing, not just condos, but and apartments, but big home areas that are run by associations now with the idea it'll be more efficient. But what it's done is it's given birth to this whole different area. There are now lawyers like all they do is HOA disputes. All they do is board disputes, and they'll only represent directors because there's so many people fighting. So I really do recommend having a lawyer. I think is advisable for everybody if you're making it. If you're paying that much money anyways to get a house, why not have a lawyer come in and take a look at it and tell you what this means. Because, oh, the broker told me this. How often do you hear that? The broker said this or the seller said this. Yeah, but it's not in writing here. I don't know.
But even if it is, if it's in MLS, so I actually work with an attorney who is a title person. And so I love also that I don't do title, because what do I know about title? So that's good. But when I list a house, I'm going to ask my title person to run the municipals. So I want to know, who actually owns the house. I want to confirm the deed. I want to see what the property card looks like. And right. So if I have a listing that says it's 5 bedrooms, you can't say there's 6, because there are 6. You have to say that I listed for what is legal on the property card. You're allowed to. I can certainly disclose, which I have recently. I'm like, there used to be 2 rooms there. They took a wall down. It's not, they didn't permit that. But as long as I explain that, I'm disclosing. It might not be permitted, but at least I'm disclosing it, because clearly people have to go in eyes wide open, and they can't be surprised that, oh my God, I just thought that was a mistake. And why is it a 6-bedroom house? It's only a 4 and whatever. And when a lot of times ADUs, you talked about that, that's a huge thing in California, where there's an apartment in the basement. Is it legal or not legal? And so those are all important to know what you have and what's legal, in order to properly list it, to make sure that when people come in, they're also not unhappy. And then when they buy something or they're in contract, that they're in contract for the house that they think that it is.
No, I agree. And the days of caveat emptor, I was saying the other day on another podcast, are gone pretty much. That's why we have the lemon laws and all these other things.
So I do generally write as is on my properties, but as is, so what as is really, you're buying the house as it was the day of your inspection, right? So if things, let's say if there was a leaking sink, is probably a bad thing, because there's probably something in the contract that says you can't have leaks or whatever, or you can't have a roof leak or whatever. But let's say if there's something, a TV, or that's a bad idea. A stone wall is a certain way, maybe it's heaving a little bit, and you do an inspection and they say, yeah, it's heaving, we're going to fix it or whatever. You can't really heave more when you close. If it's the same heave as the day you went into contract, you're really delivering the house that day, not with flooding or roof damage or things like that, as opposed to buying it brand new with like builder warranties, right? So you're buying this house, right? Where an example would be the roof. If you're buying a house that has a 12-year-old roof, that's an as-is roof, in the sense that in a month from now, it's 12 years and 1 month old. It's not like all of a sudden there should be a new roof. So I don't know, saying that again, would it hold up in court? And I generally say it's this house, right? It's not another house. It's this house as it is now.
In your case, yeah, I will say generally using as is problematic with the current disclosure laws. However, in the case that you're describing it, Daniel, you're more saying, look, this is the current condition as inspected. We're not making warranties saying there's something wrong or not wrong. Was it tough? You may be taking a piece of junk, just take it. You're not saying that. And that's a different legal connotation, as I see it, because I have seen as is litigation, and the person who says as is, it doesn't always go up. However, they are talking about something else.
And we do have more disclosures now in New York. So you do have to say things, right? So if your basement flooded, you have to say that your basement flooded. And I always tell people, go back and think, are there any insurance claims that you've put in through a flood or whatever? Because that's going to come up, right? Or so you need to disclose that. And that's how, and sometimes it just might be that a bathroom leaked in in the second floor and leaked down, and you have a $12,000 bill because of sheetrock or whatever. Okay, that's coming up. So say that happened, because you're also allowed to say it was a toilet leak or a shower leak, and it's fixed, right? Here are the bills that fix it. So I just had one where disclosures came out. It's unusual to do this, but my client actually went to see how much his homeowner's insurance was going to be before we were in contract. That's unusual. And they're like, oh, there's a claim for a flood for $130,000. And we're like, nothing was put on. And so we contact the listing agent. We're like, can you tell us a little bit more about the flood? And they're like, they looked at us. We had three heads. What are you talking about? There's nothing that they need. There's nothing, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, and it wasn't like that the people have owned the house for 32 years and they forgot about something. Maybe they would have forgotten that. Maybe they owned the house for 4 years. It was like 2 years ago, or it was like 3 years ago.
It was
And we're
recent. It was
it was
recent. Yeah.
recent enough. We're like, and they're like, and so it turns out that it wasn't that much. That the claim when it was open was probably like that, and it was still reported. But it was like an $80,000 claim that it was paid.
That's still
And
a lot. Yeah.
I know, and there's some. We knew that there were some pumps and things in the basement, but we didn't know why. Because you're allowed to proactively put things in your basement to prevent stuff. So it was this whole thing back and forth, and they were looking like we were, like we're like all we really did was we ran the Carfax on the house. That's really what. That's really what we ran the Carfax, and we saw that there was claims, and they looked at us like we were idiots, and we were like, and there was never like an apology. The other funny thing was the owner of the house, it was there was a husband and wife, and the house was only really in a trust for the wife and some other person. I don't even know who that other person was. Maybe a parent, I don't know. And they were trying to also then argue that they didn't need to disclose anything because like if an estate sale happens, you don't, or a condo, you don't, in New York, you don't have to disclose that. We're like, because you have a living trust, or that's not really, you can't get shielded from disclosures when it's you. My house is in my, it's half in my trust and half in my wife's revocable trust. But we can't say we're not filling that out because we're really the owners. We're the
But
owners
no,
of
you're
our
the owner of
trust.
your trust. And now I get what you're saying. And again,
And
the
they
trial.
tried to argue that. And we're like, okay, first off, we nailed you because we now have this insurance claim. So we're like, why don't you just kind of apologize and say you misremembered, which they didn't. But I was like, now that we know that there was a problem, there was a generator, but it was a portable generator. And we're like, now that this was actually something that happened, we want a generator that's up to your gas line where it's automatic. Because my client happens to travel a little bit. And so they don't want to have to be there and turn it on to move it in place.
Right,
So I
right.
ended up getting like $10,000 to pay for the generator. And it was like they had to do it because they were but I shouldn't have to put people in a pickle. They clearly didn't disclose. We weren't in contract yet. So technically, I guess they it was more distasteful than it was something that was illegal. They were going to be doing something illegal, but we did get the disclosures
Well,
before
it's
we went
good
in
that you weren't
contract.
in contract because that can lead to other issues. And just some of the things that the trial attorney will pick up, the I don't know what you're talking about, the vehement denials and the arguing and the deflecting responsibility and the arguing with you are all signs
Yes.
that you're probably on to something. So,
Wow, especially when you have the proof that it happened. So I just was hoping that we would have gotten an apology. We never really got the apology, but we did get the $10,000 off, which
but look, you got the property. Those people are not here to let your client's life or yours. And
exactly.
you were smart to do your due diligence and things like that.
So,
I think that's the
well,
lesson there.
what's interesting is my client was really the one that went to go get the insurance faster. Normally, that takes a little bit of time. I would think that same conversation would have happened after we were in contract, and then we could have brought up, you might want to do these things because you don't want litigation, right? That says, why didn't you properly disclose? We're like, you were about to improperly disclose. So that's like the adventures of a real estate broker, right? And that's in my 8th year of doing this with 500 houses, right? So that's the story, right? And but I have to now take that and say, maybe I should push my people to do insurance a little bit more because you never know, right? Run the Carfax on the car before you buy the before
That's
you're
smart. No, it's smart. And that is a change in here too. People do that here in California as well. But see, that's the case where you saved the day, Dan. Your clients knew what they were getting into as opposed to being blindsided later when they found out something or there was another problem that they had to sue for.
right. And so that's where I can't imagine people that do it part time. And I can't imagine it's like, this is my full time job. I'm doing it every day. You have to have, and then when those things happen, how do you call them? You call you call someone that's a flood specialist. You call a contractor. You need to have a Rolodex of people so that you can call to try to help make me better. And it's the same thing with legal stuff. I can't do legal, so I know enough that I can say things, but ultimately I need lawyers to protect me to say, yeah, if you don't do what Danny's telling you, we will sue. So that's where I get the backup of that. And again, using inspectors or using title people. I in my book, I have a story where there must have been a typo in one of the in 1940s or 50s. There was a death certificate in a newspaper, and it looked as though there could have been another sibling. And we had to prove that it was a typo and not another sibling who might have laid claim to the property. And I was directed to go to the cemetery with a shovel and look for the footstones to see if there was another.
Something you don't hear every day.
So that's in my book, The Adventures of a Real Estate Broker.
Some title, and I like the cover.
So the title's actually a book that I sold twice, the house that I sold twice, and one of my daughter's friends, a graphic artist, so she helped put it
Nice,
together.
nice.
But again, that's the whole thing, that there's these stories and they're interesting. So I tried to write a book that is not boring. Although some people said that they use my book instead of melatonin to go to sleep at night, but that's okay. But ultimately, it's like everything we do is we're dealing with people, and it's the same thing as a trial attorney, right? Like you're dealing with people, and you're dealing with people who bad things have happened to, why that you need to be in court, but yet you're dealing with people. How do you help those people? You do the best that you can to try to help them
Well,
be
that's the
protected
hard
by the
part.
law.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, telling them, say, look, you're not gonna get what you want, or we may have lost a motion, or we may have done this, and we usually win most of our cases, but not all of them, and taking the facts as they are, and things may have happened beforehand that have nothing to do with you, and I would like to think we can win all cases. That's just not true. There is a saying which is very true. I've lost some cases that are tough, and I win most of them, knock on wood. But if you ever come across a trial lawyer who says, I've never lost, either they haven't tried that many, or they're lying, or worse yet, they're pawning the losers off, and not that any client is a loser, the losing cases off to someone else, so they don't have to have it on the record. So
So my so that's interesting because my wife and I were chatting. She heard someone say that recently, and we were both like, because even like the best baseball players, right?
these games,
Of
yeah, that
course
someone
they
hits a home
do.
run off of a great pitcher. These things happen. This is, look, never have a lawyer who's not got, never have a trial lawyer who hasn't gotten their ass kicked a few times, because they're not going to handle it well when they do, and it will happen. And I can guarantee you, every good lawyer, all of them, have lost cases they wish they would have won, thought they would win, or won cases that they, oh my God. But if they're saying I've never lost, they're lying, haven't tried many, worse yet, they are pawning it off on just the one that they think they'll lose onto someone else, or they're selling a client out by having them settle before they lose.
Doctors do that too, right? Where some doctors will only do surgeries like on Fridays or on the weekends because I don't think it goes into their statistics. So some do that, but others might not take the really hard cases. And there's some surgeries that might be so hard, and you're like, you're the best surgeon there, right? A surgeon's going to have to lose cases because as things get so complicated, right? There could be a really hard brain surgery or a heart surgery that you're like, we
If
don't
you're
know.
on the battlefield and you have someone who's brought in, or in the ER, and you have no control and you're operating on them, unfortunately, that's a tough job right there. You got to admire, regardless of whether you like them to feel, anybody who's in the ER position, or a nurse, or anybody who's working there, because they bring in everything. Those are the case, that's how it goes. You know,
Yeah. And just like on the soccer field, right? Or the pitch, you can't win all the time, and Messi loses too. And but that's all you can do is block and tackle and take repetitions and practice to be ready for game day. Then and if you're doing the best that you can and using your head and working with the tools that you have, things happen. And
yeah.
so that the
That's
whole
how it goes. I've transitioned into martial arts now, which is awesome, by the way. So if anybody who's into karate or any other martial arts, I would really recommend it too, for those who are interested. But no, I agree. And when you choose a lawyer, I mean, can I just say a couple words when you're choosing?
yeah.
Make sure it's someone you get along, obviously well-credentialed. There's a lot of well-credentialed lawyers. Talk to them about prices. Make sure that you can have a conversation with your lawyer and that you feel comfortable around them. You don't have to be best friends, but make sure that your lawyer is being straight with you, is explaining things to you, has a good track record, has a good reputation, but make sure Your relationship with your lawyer, if it's a good relationship, is going to be a long period of time where this person is your confidant, and periods of time you're going to come to that person and need help or need guidance or need advice. Make sure that you like them, and that you, even if you're not your best friend, say, hey, I wouldn't hang out with my lawyer, but he's great. Not because they're killers, not because they win all the time, but because like I can relate to this person and things like
I
that.
also, yeah, and I also like that the lawyers that I generally try to advocate for my clients are the ones that are picking up their phones on the nights, weekends. They'll answer cell phones because that's when you need it, right? Where something comes up and you have a question, or this came in the mail about my house. Is this spam? Is this something I need to do? And how do we strategize? So I do think accessibility is the most important thing. And then obviously someone who's smart, who's going to advocate for you and makes themselves available. I think, and so many things, I think that's important as well, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's one of the things we do. And I know my godfather's firm did, a lot of other ones do. They go, I'm available, I'm there. Or they'll say, hey, I'm in something. Can I get right back to you then? Or can we call you? They're on it. They're there. If you ever find someone who's saying, oh, my next appointment's in 2 weeks, sometimes they are being honest. If you're a new client, maybe they can't take you on. Don't go with that person who gets 2 or 3 weeks to get back to you. And
Exactly.
that's a sign that when you need them, they not appear there immediately for you. And something, again, immediate response. If I'm in trial, my partner's in trial, we're not going to stop the trial to pick up your call. Okay, this may shock you.
Right.
However, if it's on my cell phone, when I see it, I will call and say, hey, we will get to you. And I've had that happen. But I agree with what you're saying.
I want to think I think we could talk for hours. And so but I do have to cut it here. I want to say anyone that's is in need of lawyering in California, Montana, or New York, Hillary Trial Lawyers, I think is the website. And on LinkedIn, Hillary Johns, you can find her. And she'll be accessible, whatever. And also if, from a trial perspective, but certainly something to reach out to her if you're interested. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking a little bit, listening to me because I like to talk too. But you taught me a lot about how am I going to rethink things? How can I sharpen my saw? How can I even get better? And I am a proponent of using lawyers to ensure that things are being done properly. Like you said, these are expensive investments that people are doing. They should absolutely use people who have the education and the training to be able to help you get into investments and homes with eyes wide open. I appreciate your time. So does everyone else. And everyone, it's Daniel Berger with the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. Until next week, thank you for listening.
Thank you. This is fun.
Thanks for joining me on the Adventures of a Real Estate Broker. I hope you enjoyed our time together as much as I did. If you laughed, learned something, or just had a good time, do yourself a favor and subscribe to the podcast. A big shout out to our sponsor, Remax Proceeds Properties, for making this all possible. Remember to leave a review if you enjoyed the show. It helps more people find us. Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and keep exploring the adventures in your neighborhood. I'm Daniel Berger, your New York Realtor, and I'll see you in the next episode.